Hello. So today I'm continuing my videos on games that I've only played once. So the next one in chronological order is the Manhattan Project. I played this one time back in 2013. I really don't remember a lot about it. So I don't remember if I liked it or not, but if I've only played it once, I probably wasn't that thrilled with it. But we'll see. I'm going to go ahead and do a playthrough, and I'll show how to set up, how to play the game, and then do a sample turn or two. So I've got the game all set up for 3 players here, but I'll go ahead and go through the steps. Alright, first thing you do is put the main board in the middle of the table. Then you get a token of each player's color. Put them on the plutonium track, the enriched uranium track, and on the espionage track. Okay, next you can create the general supply, starting with the building cards, the bomb cards, the 10 loaded bomb markers, damage markers, coins, yellow cake cubes, the 12 gray character tokens, and then 4 engineers and 4 scientists of each player color. And those all go in the general supply. Then you sort the implosion test counters in order, and the rules state which numbers you get, so you only use 0, 4, and 8 for a 3-player game. Then you take the 6 starting cards. The starting cards have a red back. In my version, only 4 of them had a red back. It was a misprint, so well, that's not one. I think it's the universities. They had a blue back, so I've marked which ones should have been starting cards. Anyway, you shuffle the 6 starting building cards and lay them out in order, starting at the 2 space. Then you shuffle the remaining building cards and draw the top building card and put it in the 20 space. Then you shuffle the bomb cards and draw 1 greater than the number of players and lay them out in a row. So I've got a 3-player game, so I draw 4 cards and lay them out in a row next to the board. Then you give the players their supply. Each player gets a sheet in his, or a player board in his color. 4 laborers in their color. 10 value worth of coins, 1 fighter that goes on their number 1 on their fighter space, and 1 bomber that goes on the 1 of their bomber space. And then I'm playing with the nations expansion, so I dealt 1 nation card to each player. So I've done that, and then depending on the player order, you may get a bonus. So the first player gets no bonus. The second player gets 2 extra coins, and the third player gets 4 extra coins. And that's set up. So then we're ready to play. Okay, so what can you do on your turn? Well, you can either place workers or you can retrieve workers. And if you place workers, you can place 1 worker on the main board and then any number of workers on your buildings that you have either on your board or possibly, which I'll get to later, on another person's board. But let's go into a little more detail on the actions if you place something on the board. Oh, and I should mention, I said you may place a worker on the main board. You don't have to, that's optional. And when you get buildings on your board, you may place a worker there. Again, that's optional, but you have to at least, if you're doing the place workers action, you have to at least place either one worker on one of your buildings on your board or another player board, or at least one worker on the main board. If you don't place any worker, then you have to do the retrieve workers action. And when doing the retrieve workers action, you have to be able to at least retrieve one worker. All right, so let's get on to the different actions on the main board. All right, so the first space you have here is the construction space. Now that's one of the only spaces on the main board that can hold any number of workers. Most of them can hold 1, 2, or 3 workers, but the construction space holds one worker. I mean, any number of workers. Now, when you do the construction action, put a worker on here for construction action, what you're doing is going to take one of these buildings that's available. And the buildings have a cost, starting with $2, $3, $5, $7, $10, $14, $20. Now the first two, you see they have this engineer icon, and it's also stated down here. If you place an engineer worker here, then you can get the building in this slot or this slot without paying the indicated cost. But if you use a laborer or a scientist, then you have to pay either the 2 or 3 coins to get that building. And again, that's indicated here and here. So, again, you pay the amount. You take the bill. If you pay for a building, you take it, put it on your player board, and then, for example, if you paid for the university, you would take that, put it on your player board, then you would slide all the cards down one slot, grab the top card from the building deck, and put it in the 20 coin slot. So let's just look at the buildings and see how they work. So when you have a building in one of your slots on your board, when you place a worker on a building to take its action, it shows the number. Like this is a question mark, you can put any worker there, and since there's only one, you can put one worker, and then the output is what's down here. So if you put one kind of any worker here, you would get a scientist of your color, if there's still some of your color in the general reserve, and then that would become a permanent worker for you. You get to keep it anytime you did retrieve workers. If you've already got all your scientists, then you could take a scientist from the contractors, but that's not a permanent worker. You would end up having to return that at some point when somebody does a retrieve workers action. So that's what the building, these are the starter buildings. They give probably less benefit than some of the more advanced buildings. But so that one, for one worker you can get a scientist. For any 2 workers you can get 2 yellow cake, which is these cubes. For 1 worker of any type you can get a fighter, or if it has a slash, that means or 2 coins, a bomber, 2 coins. But when you get some of these more, let me just grab one, maybe a more advanced one. Okay, this one's a reactor to let you get plutonium. So when you put this on your board, if you wanted to take this action, you'd have to put 2 scientists and either use a uranium if you had one and slide your thing down 1, or 7 yellow cake, and then the output from that would give you 3 plutonium up on the track. So that's kind of how the buildings work. So again, the construction space lets you get a building by paying for it. Okay, the airstrike space, there's 2 of those. That lets you attack either with your fighters. You can attack another player's fighters and bombers, or use a bomber to damage other players' buildings. But if another player has fighters above 0, you cannot bomb their buildings. So normally if you take an airstrike action, so let's just say I had 3 fighters. So you can attack any or both players with your fighters if you do an airstrike action, and you can do as many as you want and bomber actions. So with each fighter action, I could reduce my fighters by 1, and that would allow me to reduce either his fighters or bombers by 1. So say I take his fighters to 0, then I could spend another one of my fighter points and take his bombers to 0, and then I still have a bomber, so I could spend my bomber, and that would allow me to put damage on. If he had buildings, I could put damage on his buildings. And if you do that, you take a damage counter and place it on. If he had a building here, you'd place a damage counter on his building. As long as a player's building is damaged, they cannot use it when they're placing workers. They can do a repair action, which we'll talk about here in a minute, which will allow them to remove damage. So again, when you do an airstrike, you use your fighters to attack other players' fighters and bombers, reducing their counter by the number you spend. And then once they have no fighters, then you can send your bombers to attack their buildings. Okay, the next action somebody can put a worker on, there's just one of those, is the repair action. And you can see this 5 coins in the middle. So if you can place any worker on the repair action, but it also costs 5 coins. So you'd place a worker and 5 coins in the bank. And then you can repair up to 3 points of damage off of your buildings. And then, if you'll see this right here, that whenever you see like the round arrows around something like that, that means that other players get to do that. So if you do the repair action for 5 coins, you get to repair up to 3 points of damage off your buildings. But then all the other players can repair, they can repair 1 point of damage for 2 coins, a 2nd point of damage for 3 coins, and a 3rd point of damage for 5 coins. And the other players get the option to do that. So that's the repair action. Okay, the factory space. If you put a worker in here, and it can be any worker, that gives you 2 fighters. If you put a worker in here, that gives you 2 bombers. And again, only one person can have a worker in one of these spaces at one time. As I mentioned, the only space that can hold more than one worker is the construction. So right here, these spaces, if you put a worker in there, you have to pay 3 yellow cake. So you have to have yellow cake in order to take this spot. But if you take this spot with any worker and pay 3 yellow cake, then you get 5 coins to your personal supply. And you'll notice these dollar signs here. If you use that space and you get the 5 coins, then you also take a 1 coin out of the general supply and put it into this tray up here. So anytime you see a space with a dollar sign, they're also up here on the buildings, the higher numbered building spaces, the last 3. If you buy one of those buildings, you put a coin over here into the bribe space. And those coins will accumulate here in the bribe space, and whoever takes the lowest, whoever buys or takes the lowest building with an engineer, they get any money that's there in that bribe space. So it gives kind of an incentive for somebody to take the lowest level building, that's been slid down there. Alright, on to the next space. You can put any worker in this space, and you get 5 coins. It's free. You know, this one costs 3 yellow cake. This one's free. You get 5 coins, but all the other players will get 2 coins. And again, you put 1 coin from the general supply into the bribe space. And then lastly, this space, you have to put either an engineer or a scientist in there, and you'll get 3 coins. And again, a coin goes into the bribe space. Okay, down here in the mines, of course you can put any worker here, but you have to pay 5 coins. That gives you 4 yellow cake. You can put any worker here for free, and you get 3 yellow cake, but each other player gets 1 yellow cake for free. And then if you put an engineer here, you get 2 yellow cake. Alright, on to the universities. If you put any worker in here, you get 3 laborers. Again, remember the laborers are, this would probably be, because you start out with all your colored permanent laborers, so you would be getting 3 contract laborers. If you put a worker in here, you get an engineer. If you put any worker in here, you get a scientist. And if you put any worker in here and pay 3 coins, then you can get either an engineer or a scientist. Okay, this space, the design bomb, you have to place. This is one of the only spaces where you have to place more than 1 worker. You have to place a scientist and an engineer. And if you do that, then you get to take up all the bomb cards here. You choose one, pass them to their player to the left, they'll choose one. They pass to the player to their left, they'll choose one, and then of course in a 3-player game it comes back to you, so you get 1 additional. So always whoever takes this design bomb action will end up getting 2 bomb cards. Every other player will get 1 bomb card. And then you deal out again 1 more than the number of players' cards again that will be that will be available for the next player that's able to take the design bombs action. We'll talk about bombs in a minute, but I mean that's how you win the game. You play to a number of victory points, depending on the number of players. So in a 3-player game, it's 60 victory points. And you get victory points off of these bomb cards. And again, we'll talk about that here shortly. Okay, these last couple of spaces here, if you put a scientist and 2 yellow cake, you get to go up 1 on the plutonium track here. So you just move your marker up 1. And here, if you place a scientist here and pay 3 coins and 2 yellow cake, you get to go up 1 on the uranium track. So that's all the spaces on the board. And I think I've already talked about the buildings. If you do the construction action, then you get to buy a building and put it on your board. So eventually later in the game, you'll have quite a few buildings on your board. Other players will have buildings on their board. And that's where this one space we haven't talked about is the espionage track. So if you take the espionage space, you can put any worker there, pay 3 coins, and then you move up on the espionage track, and the number you're at is the number of spies you have. And that allows you, if you take that action, then you can use buildings on other players' boards. So essentially you get to use their building, and then that will block them from using it because your workers are already on it. And the number of spies you have is how many buildings of other players you can use. So the first time you use this action, you'll move your marker up to 1. You have 1 spy, so you can use 1 other player's building. The next time you use this action, then you would have 2 spies, so you could use 2 other players' buildings. Once you get up to 6, if you get up to 6, then you can't get any more, but when you take the action, then you can still use the other. You don't get to increase your spies, but you still get to use 6 buildings of the other players. Now again, you can't just do that at any time. You have to take this action to use your spies. And of course only one player can have a person there at a time. So anytime a player's worker there, until they retrieve it, nobody else can take the action. And that's the same with any of these spots. Until somebody retrieves their worker off of there, that spot is blocked. Okay, so we've talked about the place workers. Now let's talk about the retrieve workers action. So if you've placed all your workers, you've gone around taking turns, you've placed all your workers, and you don't have any left to place, or even if you have some left but you want to get some back so you free up some spaces on the board, then you do the retrieve workers action. And when you do that, you'll remove any of your permanent workers from the main board, put them back in your supply. Any workers that are on your buildings or bombs, which we haven't talked about, but buildings, bombs, your nation card, you'll return those, your permanent workers, to your supply. Any workers you have on other people's buildings from using the spies on the espionage track, you'll return those to your supply. Any contractors will go back to the general supply. And whenever you do a retrieve workers action, any contractors on the main board, even if you didn't place them, any contractors on the main board then get placed back in the general supply. All right, so we'll talk about bomb actions and winning the game. As I said, you win by victory points, depending on the number of players. 3-player game that I was playing is to 60 points. So anytime you've done the place workers action, at any point during your turn when you've done a place workers action, you can do bomb actions. So for instance, if at some point in the game you or another player had done a design bomb and you had this bomb in your hand of cards, well, it's worth 26 points if you build it. So in order to build it, this particular bomb, you have to have 2 scientists, 2 engineers, and 6 uranium. So if on your turn you have that and you want to build this bomb and you've taken the place workers action, then you can put the bomb card out of your hand into the play area, put the required workers on it, and then this one requires 6 uranium, so you would have to slide your token down 6 spaces on the uranium track. So you would have had to acquire all that before you build it. So again, so on your turn, if you do the build bomb action, you do all that, then you place it down, and this is now worth 26 points to you. Now, another thing you can do when you build the bomb is you can load it. So to load the bomb, you have to pay the amount of coin that it shows here, so it would cost 3 coin, and you have to lower your bomber track by 1, so you would have to have at least 1 bomber to load it. And then you get to put a loaded bomb counter on that bomb, and it's worth an additional 5 points. So now this player, if he built this bomb and loaded it, it would be worth 31 points towards the 60 that is required to win the game. So that's a uranium bomb. Let's look at a different example. Let's look at a plutonium bomb. So the same way on your turn, if you've done a place workers action, you could build this plutonium bomb. You'd have to put a scientist and an engineer and go down 4 on the plutonium track, so your marker would have to have been on at least 4 or higher. Go down. But you'll notice plutonium bombs have two possible scores. This one has 8 and this one has 13. And of course you can load this bomb as usual for $2 and a bomber. You can load this and get a $5 loaded or 5-point loaded bomb token on here. But normally you would only score 8 points for this. But if at some point you do an implosion test, so to do an implosion test, you basically lose the value of the bomb you're going to do the implosion test with. So say I built this bomb, I have to have built it. I don't have to have loaded it. In fact, if you're going to test it, it's probably best not to load it, because you'll just end up losing that bomber and $2 for nothing. So if you build a bomb and then use a plutonium bomb and then you say, I'm going to do an implosion test with it. So basically then you just discard this bomb to the bottom of the bomb card stack, like so. Just put it back at the bottom of the bomb card stack. And then you take the top implosion test marker. It's worth 8 points. You know, the next person to do an implosion test, theirs will only be worth 4 points. And the last one in a 3-player game is with 0. But if you said I'm going to do a test, you discard your bomb card to the bottom of the bomb stack, take this implosion test token, any workers you had put on that bomb to build it, then you then put them on this implosion test token. And now that's good for the rest of the game for you. So first of all, this one's worth 8 points. So in the case with that bomb that we discarded, that's an even trade because it was only going to be worth 8 points anyway. But some of them are worth more. For instance, you know, this one would have been worth 13 points without a test. But you discard, to do the implosion test, you discard it, put the workers you'd use to build it on your implosion test counter. This is worth 8 points, but from now on, any plutonium bombs that you build are worth the higher value. So if later on you built this one, it's worth 26 points instead of 13 points. And that's good for all your future plutonium test bombs. You can only do one implosion test during the game, you know, per player. But again, that then gives all your future plutonium bombs worth the higher value. So that's pretty much the game. You're placing your workers on the board, trying to get, you know, money, engineers, scientists, plutonium and uranium, so that you can build the bombs, and then the first player to reach the score required for the number of players. So in this case, first player to build bombs enough to get 60 points, victory points, then they win the Manhattan Project. Okay, so I've reset everything. So I've showed all the different actions, so now we'll just go through a couple of turns, just to show how it works. So we'll say red player is first. We'll just say he wants to get a building to start getting some scientists and engineers. So he's going to put his laborer in the construction space, and he's going to pay 2 coins. He's got a 5, so he gets 3 back. And then he'll get this university and put it in his play area. And we slide all these building cards down. And then draw a new one to go in the 20 spot. Okay, now he's placed one worker on the main board, and that's all you can do. But then you can place any number of workers on buildings and so forth. So This university just costs one worker of any type, so he'll put a red laborer on that, and that gets him a scientist of his color as long as it's in the general supply. So now this scientist is a permanent worker for him. And it'll go over here into his supply. And he could use that right now if he had other buildings that required scientists or not, but he doesn't at this point. So he still has some workers. He's got his nation card, which if you put a worker of any type on this, you can get either 2 fighters or remove a damage from your building. So he'll go ahead and put one of his laborers on that, and that lets him get 2 fighters, so his fighter count goes up. Now there's not really anything else he can do. He doesn't have any more buildings. He's already put his one worker on the main board, so that's all he can do. So now he'll go ahead and say he's done. We go to the next player. Alright, blue's the next player. Let's just say, just for example, we'll say he wants to get some more money. So he's going to put a worker. He can put any worker in this spot. So he gets five coins. But every other player gets 2 coins because he took that. So 2 comes here to purple. 2 over here to, oops, I tried to, oh yeah, that's right. 2 to red. And then, because we used one with this red dollar sign, 1 goes from the general supply into the bribe spot. Alright, so that's his one worker on the main board. He doesn't have any buildings. He didn't buy any buildings. He does have his national nation card, but his takes 2 workers to get 2 fighters or activate airstrike. Well, he doesn't have anything else to do with these workers, so he says, all right, I'll go ahead and put 2 workers on there and get 2 fighters. Then he says, okay, I'm going to be done for this round, or this turn. So now we come to purple. And purple, well, he thinks he wants to get an engineer. So he's going to put 1 worker here. That gives him an engineer, so he gets 1 of his color, permanent. And again, he'll have that. That's now a permanent worker for him, which he can use immediately. He's put the 1 worker on the main board he can do. That's all he can place up there on the place workers phase. He doesn't have any buildings except for his nation card, which he can put 1 worker of any type and get 2 bombers or 1 bomber and 3 money. So that's what he thinks he's going to do. So I could put a laborer or an engineer. It's any type. So he's going to put a laborer. He's going to get 1 bomber and 3 coins. So now that's pretty much all he can do this turn, because he's already placed his 1 worker there. He doesn't have any more buildings to place on. So he's going to say he's done. Back to red. Alright, red's turn again. He's only got 2 workers left that he hasn't placed, 1 scientist and 1 laborer. So let's just say he wants to, let's say he wants to use this scientist to, he can go here and put an engineer or a scientist. So he'll put a scientist, then he gets 3 coins. So he'll take those, put them in there, and then again, remember, because this is a space with the red dollar sign there, we have to put 1 coin in the bribe spot. And again, remember, whoever buys or gets this building gets that money. So now he's put his 1 worker on the main board. If he had any buildings or that he could put other workers on, he's got 1 left, but he doesn't. So he'll just say he's done for the turn. Okay, so we're back to blue. He's only got 1 worker he hasn't placed. So we'll just say he's going to go here and get himself a scientist. So he takes a scientist of his color. Again, that becomes a permanent worker for him. He could use that right now, but he doesn't have any buildings to put workers on. So obviously in the early few turns there's not a lot you can do because you don't have a lot of buildings. So he's going to pass. We go on to purple's turn. So we'll just show for an example. Purple, he now has this engineer. So remember, you can get any of these first two buildings at no cost if you use an engineer. So he'll take the construction space, and he's using an engineer, and he'll take this building. So he gets to put that on his player board. And because he took one of these first, no, it's actually this one. If you take this building, then you get this money. So he gets to put that in his pot. And now we slide all the cards down. And as you can see, better buildings start coming out that give you better resources. But early on, they cost a lot, 14 and 20. So he placed his one worker on the board, so he's still got two workers left. So he got this mine. It takes two workers of any type. He can put his two laborers on there, and then now that gives him two yellow cake. And yellow cake are used to get uranium and plutonium. So he's got that. He doesn't have any workers left, so probably on his next turn he'll have to do a retrieve workers action. Come back to red. He's only got one worker left. He could do a retrieve workers now if he wanted, but he'll go ahead and use this one worker just to show. He'll go here. You can use any worker. That'll give him 3 yellow cake. So he'll get that. And each other player, because of this, gets 1 yellow cake. So blue will get 1 yellow cake, and purple will get 1 yellow cake. And he doesn't have any workers left to place, so that's going to be it for his turn. And blue just has 1 worker left, and just for kicks, I mean, you probably wouldn't normally do this, but he's going to do an airstrike that can use any worker. Most of the other spots that he wants are used. So he does airstrike, so he's going to lower his fighter by 1, and he'll reduce purple's fighters to 0. He'll reduce his fighter again by 1 and reduce red's fighters by 1. He's got 1 fighter left, so he will reduce that to 0, and we'll just say he takes red's bomber down to 1. And then he has a bomber he could use, so he'll use that. Because purple has no fighters anymore, he can use his bomber. So he's going to put 1 damage on this building of purple. So now purple won't be able to use that building in the future unless he does a repair action and repairs it. Alright, so that's blue's turn. So purple doesn't have any workers, so he can't place any workers, so he's going to go ahead and do a retrieve workers action. So he gets all his workers off the main board, which he's just got an engineer and a laborer, and then he gets his workers off his buildings, which include his nation card over there. And that's all his workers, and that's all he can do on his turn. When you do a retrieve workers action, that's all you can do. So now we go to red. Red's got to do the same thing. He's just going to retrieve workers. So he gets them off the main board, puts them back in his play area. Retrieve these off his buildings, puts them back in his play area. So now what I'm going to do is go ahead and I'll skip ahead a few turns and maybe get to where we can see building a bomb and that kind of thing. Alright, I've jumped ahead a few turns and we'll just see some of the actions we hadn't seen. So we'll do the design bomb action. So that takes a scientist and an engineer. So blue's going to take a scientist and an engineer. and take the design bomb action. So now he gets to get all these cards and choose one that he wants to take. So we'll just say he's going to take, he'll take this, and he puts it in his hand. Then he passes all these to the next player, which is blue. So blue will choose one. I will just say he's going to take this uranium and put it in his hand. Then it comes to purple, and he'll choose one, and he'll take this uranium bomb one. And then the last one comes back to red again, so he has both. So that's his action to place workers on the main board. He still has other workers he can place, so say he'll put one worker on this university. It can be a worker of any type, and he gets an engineer. So he gets to take one of the engineers from, and that becomes a permanent worker for him. Then let's say he wants to get some more uranium. So it takes 2 scientists, which he now has. Costs 5 money. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that goes in the bank. And 2 yellow cake, which he has here. He's got 3, so he'll put 2 back in the general supply. And now he gets 2 uranium. So he gets, this is the uranium track, so he gets to move up 2 on that track. Now actually he's got plutonium bombs, so he needs to be getting plutonium. But anyway, he's still got 3 workers here he could use, so he's got a couple factories where he could get bombers or money. So since he's kind of low on money now, he's going to put one guy here and take 2 money, and one guy here and get 2 more money, so for a total of 4. He'll just throw a 1 in so he can get a 5 back. And he has 1 more worker, but he's just going to end his turn there. So now we go to blue. He's got 1 worker left. He's got that uranium bomb, so he needs 4 uranium, a scientist, and an engineer. Right now he's only got 2 uranium, so he's got an engineer. Let's see what he wants to do. We'll just say he wants to get another scientist. So there's this space left where he'll have to pay. He can put any worker, but he's got to pay 3 coins. So I'll throw in a 5, get 2 in change. And then he can get an engineer or a scientist, so he's going to take a scientist. Now he has that guy, but I think he'll just stop there. Okay, back to purple. His bomb, he needs 6 uranium. He's currently got 3, so he'd like to get some more uranium, but it requires 2 scientists. He's only got 1. But what he can do is go on this space, which requires 1 scientist, 3 money, and 2 yellow cake. So there's his scientist. He'll pay 3 money to the bank and 2 yellow cake. And that gives him 1 uranium, so he gets to move his uranium marker up 1, so he's got 4. Alright, back to red. I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead a few more. Well, yeah, let me skip ahead a few more. Okay, I've gone ahead a turn or 2. It's the middle of Blue's turn. He's placed a guy here, or it's middle of Red's turn. He's placed a guy here, got a plutonium. Now he has this bomb, which only requires 4 plutonium. So he can be putting guys on his cards or whatever, but he wants to go ahead and take a bomb action and build this bomb. So it requires a scientist and an engineer, which he has over here, and 4 plutonium, so he'll reduce his plutonium by 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then he can decide to do an implosion test, in which case he would discard this, go ahead and discard this card now, and get the implosion test, so his future bombs will be worth more, which he decides that's what he's going to go ahead and do, since this one's only worth 8 without an implosion test, and the first implosion test token is worth 8, so it's an even trade. So he says, okay, yes, I'm going to do that. So he won't get the points for this bomb because he has to discard it, and it looks like I forgot to deal out the 4 bomb cards after I did a bomb action a little bit ago, but those are already there. So he's built that bomb and done his implosion test, so that's worth 8 points. And if he ends up in a future turn building this bomb, which he'll have to get 6 plutonium, he's down to 1, and 3 engineers and 2 scientists, but it'll now be worth 26 points and an additional 5 if he loads it. So he still has more actions he could take. So just to kind of show, what else does he got here? Signed. Let's show a espionage action. So he can't do an espionage action because he's already put a guy on the board. So we'll just say for this turn he passes. And we'll come over here to blue. It's his turn. So he needs uranium for his bomb, 4, which he's only got 3. So there's no uranium reactors up there. Both these spaces for uranium are taken. So let's just say he wants to do, he's going to do an airstrike again. So he reduces plane by 1, reduce this guy's planes by 1, reduce his plane by 1 again, and he'll reduce red's planes by 1. Probably not a smart move, but I was just trying to think of something to do. He could do this to get plutonium. Requires a scientist, which he has, and either a uranium or 2 yellow cake. He does have uranium, but he wants more of that, so he will use 2 yellow cake, and now he gets to go up 1 on the plutonium. So he's got 4. He doesn't have any plutonium bombs, but if he does a bomb action in the future, he could get one of these plutonium bombs. Anyway, I think, no, we still haven't shown an espionage action, so I'd like to show that. So maybe we'll do that here on purple's turn. All right, let's see. Yeah, we can't really show it on purple's turn. Let me skip ahead a little bit more. Alright, I've kind of just gone ahead a little bit. It's blue's turn. We'll say everybody's done a retrieve workers action, so they've got all their workers. He needs 1 more uranium to build this bomb. But he doesn't have a uranium reactor. And just to show how it works, he could go here and get a uranium, but I just want to show how this works. So let's say for his action on the board, he takes the espionage action. So he puts a worker there. He's got to pay 3 coins, but now he gets to move his espionage up 1. So he has 1 spy. So he can use 1 person, either one of purple's buildings or red's building. Well, purple has this thing to get 2 uranium, so he's going to use that. So he's going to send his 2 scientists, and he's going to pay 4 yellow cake and 3 money. So there's his change from 5. And now he gets 2 uranium. So he can move his up 2. And now that space of purples is used. Purple won't be able to use that enrichment plant until blue does a retrieve workers action and retrieves his workers. But now blue has enough uranium where he can take a bomb action and build this bomb. So it required a scientist and an engineer, which he has. 4 uranium. 1, 2, 3, 4, leaving him 1. And he just has to pay 1 coin to do a load bomb. So now he's got 18 points there towards the 60 he needs. And then he can still, he's got other buildings here he could put workers on until he finishes his turn. But I wanted to show how that works. So that's how it goes until somebody reaches the required number of points, 60 in this case. So it really only takes 2 or 3 a player to build 2 or 3 bombs. If red were to build these 2 bombs right here, and since he's done the implosion test, he gets the higher points there, so that would be 56 plus the 8 that he's done for the implosion test, 64. That would be enough for him to win the game right there if he can just build these 2 bombs. So that that's how it works. Like I said, I did play this once about 7 years ago, and I think it's an okay game. As I've played it, I kind of remembered playing it back then and thinking the same thing. I think it's okay, but I just I don't know that it's a fun game. Some games, you just when you're playing with other players and you really get into it and you're harassing each other, and like when I play Rune Wars with my friends, or War of the Ring with one of my gaming buddies. I mean, we just really get into it. I just have a lot of fun playing these. This game's a good game, but I just don't think I have a lot of fun playing it. I don't know. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense. So, I guess that's it. That's my thoughts. I think the mechanics and everything in the game are good, and if somebody asked me to play it, I would play it. But my own thoughts from remembering how I felt about it 7 years ago, and I did do an entire game playthrough myself solo the previous couple of days, just relearning the rules. And yeah, I just didn't have a lot of fun. It wasn't it wasn't just a fun game to me, where I couldn't wait to do the next turn and do the next turn. I kept kind of like doing a couple turns and then stop and say, all right, I'll come back here in a little bit. So I don't know. That's purely an opinion, and I just wanted to show how the game works. And thanks for watching.